Welcome to A Flash of Beauty, the podcast, an audio experience dedicated to the further exploration of Bigfoot and the people Bigfoot has revealed itself to. What started as a documentary of personal narrative encounter stories and expert testimony has now shifted into a deeper inquiry into the forever changed lives of those that have witnessed firsthand this hidden truth. My name is Tobe Johnson, co-producer of Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. Join me along with the crew and creators of this doc, Director Brett Eichenberger, producer Jill Remensnyder, and cinematographer Michael Ferry, as we go back into the trees to sit down once again with each guest in search of the truth, no matter how strange. Jill and Brett, hello.
Hey, what's
Hello.
up?
We are back. I need to do my my top 40 radio voice. Welcome back. Flash Beauty back.
Your Casey Kasem Bigfooter voice.
Right. More like some AM station in Cedar Woolley, but I'll take it.
You're listening to 107.2 Des Moines Hit Radio.
Awesome. Hey, you know, I before we started here, Brett and I were talking a little bit about, as well with Jill, about this latest, and once in a while we'll go other places here, but we just got done watching the Stephen Greer 3.5 hour disclosure. It's on YouTube. I think if you type in Stephen M. Greer, maybe it's Stephen H. Greer or Stephen Greer, you'll find it probably at the top of the feed. Even 3 weeks after we did this interview here with our upcoming guest, it should still be up at the top. I think it's already got a couple 100,000 views in the first 24 hours. And there's a strong reason for it. It's for the fact that it mirrors a lot of what's in Flash of Beauty, as far as, you know, the new term, the old term, but the new term is whistleblowers, that is coming out regarding the Whistleblower Act, protecting people that have seen UAPs. And Brett, Jill, you guys did this as well. You were kind of Stephen Greer's in the Bigfoot world, and everybody who's made a Bigfoot documentary, let's be honest, has done the same. And we stand on their shoulders here. But tell me about what you thought about this documentary, or this Stephen Greer YouTube video here. I think it's an important step in the right direction as far as looking at these hidden events.
Well, you know, he did one in 2001. That was
right. This is number 2.
This is number 2, and the one in 2001, I remember it being really interested in it, but it didn't catch. It didn't catch like this one did, because, you know, YouTube wasn't. I don't even know if YouTube was really around back then as much, and there wasn't the kind of disclosure and the kind of forthcoming people that there is now. And so that's what's really interesting to me, is how these people are just kind of coming out of the floodgates. I mean, it certainly helps that Congress passed a law saying that they'd be protected, which is a huge step in the right direction. But I don't know. I think what Dr. Greer is doing, I think what he's doing is very important. And I think that Bigfoot is going to ride on his shirt tails. You know, it's funny because I'm watching it as if I'm in the room, and I'm like, hey, back here with my hand up going, what about Bigfoot? You know, and honestly, I would expect, had I really been there, Stephen to kind of look back there and squint and go, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? And that needs to change. That needs to change, because Bigfoot is partner in these paranormal instances. And we're going to discuss that in the sequel. And, you know, I know there's a lot of folks out there that are on the fence about the flesh and blood and so on and so forth, but there's just too much going on in this paranormal realm to ignore it. And what's so fascinating to me is that Bigfoot is doing the same things that these UFOs are. You know, the timing, the warping space and time, and the cloaking, and I mean, we're all talking about the same quote unquote magic, if you will. So that's why I think this is super important. I think that UFOs lead and Bigfoot follows.
No, I agree. You know, as far as this whole idea about, you know, what Greer is saying and all the whistleblowers who are coming forth, you know, as far as saying like, oh, it's the door is opening. No, I think Bigfoot's going to come in and kick the door down and say, "Here I am." Because once we acknowledge all like that, okay, all this UFO stuff is happening, and it gets even weirder. If you haven't listened to the full, uh, what would you call it? It wasn't a webinar. It wasn't a seminar. It was
Press conference. It was a press conference.
a truth bomb. Yes, press conference. There's some stuff in there that was like, wait, they just said that out loud. Oh, we're having this
Right.
conversation.
Right.
Okay, this is happening. So yeah, I think and I
Right.
also think it's I also think that a lot more people are going to come forth with their Bigfoot encounters that get into this weirder stuff. And again, it ties back to our sequel, A Flash of Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot, is we're opening the door for people to come out and say, yeah, me too. And it's not just a sighting. It's not just a big hairy thing crossing the road. It's things that are, let's just say it gets weird.
Yeah. And I'll just be honest with you guys. We don't have any, like Bigfoot's crawling out of UFOs in the sequel, but we do have some things that might make you think twice as to whether or not Bigfoot is extraterrestrial in origin or partially extraterrestrial. So I'll throw that out there.
Right. I'm not going to say anymore.
Or it could be the opportunity. I don't know, Brett. There might be another documentary coming out, A Flash of Beauty, WTF. Just because there's some crazy, there's like some stuff that it's just hard to wrap your head around, and it's out there and it's real and it's happening.
And it's just so hard for us to resist, folks. I mean, our guest here is very fair-minded, and I'm talking about our guest Amy BUE, who is a part of Project Zoobook. You should look into it. Like-minded scientists, all looking at the phenomena. Some skeptical, not some that are witnesses. And this is how this is done. This is how the soft disclosure is slowly done. Is people get curious. That's the point of interest. That's where I came from, a sense of curiosity and saying, wow, there's still mysteries in the world. And that's exactly where Amy BUE comes in too, a very genuine person. I think that's the apt word to describe her, a solid researcher, and she's in our documentary, and I think she's taken the right approach. So without further ado, let's get into it here with our guest, Amy BUE. With us now is researcher Amy BUE from A Flash of Beauty. And also, she was a contributor to the Bigfoot Influencers book, as well as Project Zoobook. She's also an active member of the Olympic Project. Hello, Amy BUE.
Hello.
You are 3 hours ahead of us here. We want to make good use of your time, so let's get into it. Time and time again, Amy, people have real admiration for you and your research, which is kind of a rare thing in this community. Everyone has a really solid opinion of your research and the way you do it, but also just your personality. So kudos on that. And it's really the first time I got a chance to talk to you. And so I'm eager to learn more about you and your experiences. So Jill and Brett probably know a little bit more about your origin story, but why don't you tell our audience a little bit how you got interested in Sasquatch out of the gate?
Sure thing. And thank you for that. I really appreciate you saying that. I'm just a normal person. I am a teacher and a technical writer over here in Ohio, and was never really into Bigfoot until 2012. I saw something from a car window. I was the passenger going over a body of water and saw something holding onto a tree and looking out at the water. It was very large, it was very dark and wide, and it moved. I always say that that's my jumping off point into this topic, but I still don't know what that was, because unfortunately the car was going, pretty fast, and it was at least 100 yards away. but it sent me down the rabbit hole because in my mind, what it looked like was what I would think Bigfoot looked like. So I said, I think I just saw a Bigfoot, and then immediately thought that was stupid because Bigfoot's not real. That's what I thought at the time. And started reading everything I could and talking to people and listening to witnesses. And here I am today.
So you didn't get a good look at it, but you got a good enough look that it got a bug started. Why do you think
Yes.
that is? And tell me what your initial next steps were.
Well, yeah, it was like I saw that, and then I started pretty immediately, like within that week, Googling, Bigfoot, Sasquatch in Ohio. And it didn't take long to find out that not only was I not the only person that said they saw something like this, but that I wasn't the only person that saw it in the area I saw it in. I thought Bigfoot was a myth, and just something for fun. And now my opinion has totally changed, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. But it just sent me pretty quickly into reading reports that I found on the internet, and then reading every single book that I could find on the topic. And I have just been on this steady path to try to figure this out for myself. And I still call myself a hopeful skeptic because I've never had a smoking gun absolute experience, but I have had some really cool experiences that have added to my belief that I absolutely believe that it could be real. And most days I think it is real. But every once in a while I have doubts, like a lot of other people, in good company with that. Peter Burns, never seen one either. But it has been a never ending source of fascination for me.
Now, here you are in Youngstown, Ohio, home of one of the largest conferences in all of America is in Ohio,
Right.
Salt Fork, right? So how far are you from Salt Fork?
I'm a few hours from there. I used to help with that conference, but kind of got away from that. My preference, I still do different conferences and I enjoy that, but my preference is to either be out in the woods or to be speaking to people that aren't necessarily in the Bigfoot community. So today I do a lot of outdoor shows, hunting and fishing shows, which is where I primarily speak and meet my witnesses.
Yeah, we'll have to get you in contact with Dan Young. Dan, if you're listening, Dan is an outdoor radio guy attached to ESPN. I think you're right up his alley as far as your perspective is concerned. So you may be getting a call for another radio show here. Give her a call, Dan. I'll give you some information on Amy.
Call me, Dan.
Call her. Call her. Brett,
Call her,
Jill.
Dan. Call her.
Yeah. You got any questions here before I keep still in the limelight? Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, I want to jump in because, hi, Amy. One of the very first things we talked about in your interview is, you talked about how once you kind of jumped into this world, one of the things you did was educating yourself, and how you've really, spent time learning about the outdoors and animals, and like what makes this noise, what sounds like that. Can you talk about that? Some of the education that you've pursued because of this.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you. Yeah, I've just felt it was very important because when I first started getting into this, I was a pretty big novice at camping, let alone, going into the wilderness and looking for any type of an animal. I had grown up going to my grandpa's hunting cabin in Pennsylvania in the Allegheny National Forest, but that was a cabin, right? And everybody was with me, and I didn't have to know a lot of things. So first and foremost, I wanted to keep educating myself to know what was not Bigfoot out in the woods. I get a lot of audio sent to me and footprints and different things. And my big thing that I say is that not only do I not want to ever mislead or I guess mislead is a good word, other people about what something could be, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't misleading myself. You know, I want, I'm looking for solid evidence that I can be sure of. So again, I started just educating myself, and then I went back to school to through Ohio State University. There's a program called OCVN, which is Ohio Certified Volunteer Naturalist Program, and you learn about all different kinds of animals and soils and watershed management and about trees and all that kind of thing, and went through that whole program. So I am an OCVN now. Another big reason I did that is because sometimes you can get into areas that you aren't otherwise allowed to get into. But also, I enjoy at our different state parks, I can help put on different programs, and I can educate people about other animals and plants and things. And then I also went to survival school. So there's a school here in Ohio called the Midwest Native Skills Institute. And this, what I always say, I'm not typically what people would think of when they see a Bigfooter, I think. And I'm like, I want to know how to be okay out there, because usually I'm with other people, but sometimes I'm out by myself, make sure I have my personal GPS and all that kind of thing. But I wanted to be able to take care of myself and know how to, build a fire that wasn't a Duraflame log and a, and a match or something. So I went through a lot of different classes with that school, to the point where I was asked to be assistant trainer. And so hopefully here in the near future, I'm going to be able to do that. So it's a lot of fun. I've learned things that I've never ever expected myself to be doing. But I think all of that really uh, helps with this topic and with my own research, especially because I'm trying to do it from a scientific perspective with my project that I have going on.
Amy, and looking at the evidence that's out there, some 50 years, we'll say, um, what do you think is the greatest body of evidence? Where does it point to? What kind of physical evidence do you think, if there is a nail in the coffin, where do you think it is?
As far as physical evidence, everybody knows, well, not everybody, but we who are into this know about the different footprint evidence, things like that. But I go back, what I look at that makes me the most fascinated and convinced that this could be a real natural creature. And I'm not saying it is, that's just my interest. There's a lot of different ideas about what Bigfoot could be, but is the goes back longer than 50 years, are all the Native American stories. And I've spent some time, I was very blessed to be able to go out to the Blackfoot Reservation in Montana last summer, was invited out there to do some Bigfoot research, look for the enigmatic, which is what they call the hairy man. And they just look at it as a natural, normal thing, which I just rewatched A Flash of Beauty with my mom. And you're talking, one of the people in there was talking about that as well, about how it's just normal to them. This is just another animal, or not, could be closer to a hominid out there in the forest. So I feel that those stories are what I find the most compelling. But physically, I mean, you do have the footprints, you have so many eyewitnesses, you have lots of audio. The audio is extremely compelling to me, and it just goes on and on and on. But we all say in Bigfooting that only one of the people that says they've had a good sighting has to be telling the truth for them to be real.
Amy, it's Brett.
Hi.
Hey, so one of the things that really stood out, and of course it's in the film, is how you talk about some of these eyewitnesses that you ran into at these outdoor shows, and how some of these grown men are crying by what
Yeah.
they've seen. And when we first set out to do A Flash of Beauty, I think the biggest thing that was missing in the world of Bigfoot films, media, whatever you want to say it, was that distinctive emotional component and the psychology behind having a sighting and seeing something that you cannot forget. You know, I mean, we all remember the first time we saw a bear in the wild or whatnot, and we're on a little bit of a high for maybe a few hours afterwards. But Bigfoot's a whole different ball game, and these men are really affected, and most of these men are hunters. They've been hunters for life,
Right.
and they're too freaked out to go back into the woods, and that's very dramatic. And that to me points to some pretty compelling evidence. What kind of things have you heard from some of these guys?
Oh, you're right. Even thinking about it has me a bit emotional. Some of the things they've said, and I myself, since I, appeared in a flash of beauty and talked to you guys, I have had something that happened to me, and it wasn't a sighting, wasn't for sure, but something that really affected me going out into a certain part of the woods. So I relate more to these people I've talked to than I used to. But to give you a couple examples, at one of the outdoor shows, there was a gentleman who was older, and he had come to our table a few times. We set up there, and myself and my friends usually help me, and it's like, give us your Bigfoot stories, that's what we're there for. And you get a few laughs and things like that, but I'll tell you, like, overwhelmingly people are interested, and we've gotten hundreds of reports from doing this over the last several years. So anyway, this older gentleman comes, and he's looking at our footprints we have and things, and he leaves, and he comes back, and he leaves, and he comes back. And finally he tells myself and my research partner Tina about his story. And basically it wasn't a really dramatic story. It was just that he was in his house looking out the window, and he saw what he says was a Sasquatch standing there in a field. And he was starting to tear up because he said, you know, it didn't do anything. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't supposed to be there. Like, it wasn't supposed to be real. And he couldn't wrap his head around that. And he said that he still goes to these hunting and fishing shows. He still buys equipment. He said that the opening day of deer season was his Christmas since he was a young boy. And he cannot, ever since he saw that, he cannot go back into the woods. So he's never been hunting again, never
Wow.
been to the forest there, because it wasn't supposed to be real. And I hear that over and over. I had another gentleman right outside of Cook Forest, Pennsylvania. I'm from Ohio, but I do most of my research in PA. And he was a foreman for a construction company taking down a water tower, a small water tower in the middle of the forest. And he saw something that night that woke him up. Like, he would set his watch or phone alarm to wake up every half hour, make sure that a generator was melting the ice inside of that tower so they could disassemble it. And something shoved his truck. He heard it walk, away from the truck. He finally gets out from all of his blankets and sleeping bags, and he sees what he said was a Bigfoot watching that water tower and the fire there. And when he made a move to try to get his phone, which he had like flung over to the passenger side floorboard, the thing turned and looked toward him. It wasn't that far. I'm bad at distances, but maybe 20, 30 feet. I don't, it wasn't that far away. But what I had with me, a bear specialist from Ontario who was interviewing him, and he was there with his wife and their dog. And he's telling us this story. So I had her go stand where he said he saw this thing. And she turned and looked at us, and he started crying. And I don't mean sobbing, but definitely was shook up and upset. And he kind of went off to the side, and I was talking to his wife, and she was saying that he had never missed a day of work in his life before this, but he couldn't go back for a few days. His dog is what I tell this story often because it's what affected me the most, really, as far as a story from another person, because this man was so shook up, and his dog was upset. The dog's jumping on him, the dog's crying, upset that he's upset. And I just knew he wasn't lying. Like, I feel very strongly that he wasn't lying, and that he knew what a bear looked like, or a person. And this dog, he could not have fooled his own dog. So
Wow.
that really affected me being there where it happened, and not too long after it happened, and just seeing that raw emotion come out of this man.
Yeah, yeah. This to me is really strong evidence. It's like some of the research that John Mack was doing, the Harvard psychiatrist, when he was looking at alien abductees. He went into it going, "What is this psychosis that everybody's experiencing?"
Right.
Not even considering that they were actually being abducted by aliens. And nobody's done this in the Bigfoot world. Obviously we've got Doug Meacham, who's wonderful, and Doug's kind of on the cutting edge of this stuff, and he's brave enough and courageous enough to talk about it. But thankfully, we're able to kind of ride the coattails of what's happening right now with UAPs and UFOs, and it's kind of starting to open up some doors. And I think, as you may notice, and maybe you've already noticed, that as we continue to go through this disclosure, soft disclosure, the giggles might start stopping. You'll hear less and less of them.
Well, they have started stopping. One thing I hear over and over from people is, why aren't scientists more interested in this? If it could be real, why aren't they? And I say to them that there are a lot of scientists. What Project Zoobook is, if it's okay if I tell you what it is we're doing, in a nutshell, there's a whole long story behind it, but I met a group of primate zoologists who are interested in Bigfoot. And when they first told me that they were interested in Bigfoot, I thought, like, maybe not as a joke really, but maybe just for entertainment. But no, this group was extremely interested because of, first of all, one of them had been down to the Expedition Bigfoot Museum down in Cherry Log, Georgia, and was impressed by what they had seen. They started listening to different podcasts, reading reports, and they're like, hey, like, there could be something to this. So that started in 2018, where I was just talking to them. We soon started doing phone calls. I was getting other people who knew a lot more than I did, because, I educated myself, but I know there's people that have been doing this a lot longer that have specialties and things. And we started getting them in on the calls, and then started doing Zooms like we are here. And at this point now, 5 years later, we have over 40 different scientists who are involved in our group. From wildlife biologists to primatologists to anthropologists, some of whom are hopeful skeptics like myself, and many of whom have seen one or more Sasquatch. And so, although we are a little bit under the radar because a lot of them can't proclaim their interest as far as the universities they work at or the zoos they work at or other places in Fish and Game and different places they work at, we are doing a lot of projects with different researchers around North America. And I will tell you that every time we've had a new scientist that I've been able to get to come into our group, they have all said pretty much the same thing, that they had no idea that all of this was going on, and no idea of the possible evidence, the witness reports that this could be a real thing. Because a lot of times, unless you really dig into it, people think we're out there looking for Smurfs or something. That's the that's the
Yeah.
attitude a lot of people have. But our scientists, and we have just as many researchers across the US working with these scientists on different things, they are all in. And we've been doing this for several years now, and it just keeps kind of growing. And I'm so proud to be a part of it. I lucked into meeting these people, so I call myself the coordinator of the smart people there. I'm not the scientist, but I just coordinate things and things like that. But they are amazing, and they are very, very open-minded. So even if, getting back to your point, like, even if it's not like blasted everywhere that science is interested, they really are. We just were in the Wall Street Journal this past year for our group. There was a reporter who wanted to do kind of like a little light piece about Bigfoot, and then we invited him to some of our meetings, and he interviewed all of the scientists, and he was fascinated by it. So it turned into something a lot more than that. And not name dropping Wall Street Journal. I'm just like saying, like you said, like people are starting to get more interested. And I think you're spot on with everything with the UAPs making people say, something could be happening, that they're more and going to get more and more interested.
Yeah, I just want to throw out one more thing real quick too, because it's and I want to go back just a second here. I think, and I want to also say that I think the Zoobook project is phenomenal and has the capability of really making some changes. So real quick story, and I'm glad that you're the one I'm telling, because we haven't told this story publicly, and I'm not going to name any names, but it's relevant to you because it's your research area. When we were doing A Flash of Beauty, we interviewed a scientist who would not go on camera because he's got big defense contracts, and he's very prominent. And he and his 5 brothers have a tradition where they go hunting on Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving. And this was back in 1980 or 1981. And I'll try and keep this story short, but basically there was about 6 inches of snow. They all went out that morning, and his 5 brothers, they're all like military brats, and they brought out like firepower, way more firepower than the needed for hunting. So they get out there, this is, I don't even know what time of the morning this is, but it's fairly decent time. And they get out there, and the main brother stops the troop, and he gives them the military signal of being quiet, whatever that is, finger to lips. And he motions for them to circle around and kind of get into this defensive stance, if you will. And long story short is he had heard something, and when they finally heard what was making the noise, it was a Bigfoot carrying a bull elk underneath his right arm.
Oh, wow.
And the scientist that was telling us this story, he's an older gentleman, was looking into the camera. We were doing a Zoom, and his eyes were just welling up. And he looked at Jill and I, and he says, "You don't want to see one." And his lip was quivering, the whole 9 yards. It really affected us. And I wish we could have gotten that testimony on camera. But anyways, just thought that was very relevant to some of the experiences that you'd had at the outdoors, shows, and the fact that it takes place kind of in your research area.
Wow.
And just to hop on really quick, but Brett, he also, remember, he said they all quit hunting after that.
Right.
It was just like and I don't think they ever, now, as I recall, it was something they never talked about. It was just done.
Yeah.
Everyone quit hunting. They got rid of their guns.
I mean, this happened 43 years ago, and the guy was like still emotional about it. And part of the problem, I guess, if you will, or part of the issue was he couldn't talk about it. He couldn't come forward about it. He really wanted to. And then he kind of wavered and said, well, I'm getting close to retiring soon, so maybe I will then. But, it's the same kind of thing that we're talking about with UAPs and UFOs. There's a lot of people out there that are scared to come forward, and hopefully, we can make a space for some of these folks to come forward and feel comfortable talking about these things.
Absolutely. That's what I hope to do at those outdoor shows. There's so many people that aren't into Bigfoot, like as a hobby, or even like want to tell their stories, whether it's on a podcast or to somebody at a conference or something. And I love Bigfoot conferences, so I'm not saying they're bad or anything. And I love to go to them when I can. I'm just saying that I have found more witnesses that are new witnesses at these other outdoor shows that I do. And it's been, I got the opportunity to do one from a friend who was offered that, and he couldn't do it. And he's like, "Do you want to do it?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah." Not knowing if I would be received well, but exactly what you're saying. Our goal, my friends and I, is to be a safe place for these people to tell their stories, where we're not going to laugh at them and just a listening ear. And, you know, here we are if you want to tell us. And they do.
Everyone's saying the same thing here, and I'll chime in as well. Hearing bow hunters come to my booth in Eugene, Oregon, telling their story about why they won't go bow hunting, how Ron Moorhead sounds bring tears to their eyes because they've been waiting over 20 years to be validated. Seeing those lips quiver, these are you're reliving this hidden event, to steal a comment from the documentary. These hidden events, there's something so profound about this experience, even being fleeting, that it can split, a worldview. It can traumatize people to the core.
Yeah.
And that's what, we tried to do with this documentary, and Brett and Jill and Mike did so well, is to provide a place where that was delicately unfolded cinematically and beautifully. And I think we did it.
You did. Absolutely did. I agree.
Yeah, but this is my point with you, Amy, is that now we have somebody who's also carefully doing that in person with people. And that's what's so great about having you a part of this community. Is I hear this respect for the profound nature of what you're hearing, rather than the sensational nature, which is so tempting just based upon the fact that it's, potentially a man monkey monster out in the woods at its
Right.
base element, right? There's
Right.
something else. And I'll go back to Todd Neese's comments when he said that when he saw it, it was almost too much. It was like looking at God.
Yeah.
And that's a really profound thing to unpack. And I hear that coming from you. So talk a little bit about the profound nature. And I'm getting too serious about Bigfoot right now, but let's go there. Tell me what you think about this.
Oh, I think you're spot on. I I feel what's lacking a lot in the Bigfoot community is that we forget sometimes that no matter how important Bigfoot is, and Bigfoot is important to us, to me it is, going from seeing something that I'm not really sure about in 2012 to having another possible sighting through a FLIR camera in 2018, to seeing some things, hearing some things, um, to what I do now. I just have, and especially starting to work with different indigenous groups, First Nations groups, I have such a respect not only for Bigfoot, so I'm not downplaying that at all, but sometimes we forget that there's people involved and that they're really important. You know, there's just so much drama and so much jockeying for position or who does what, and I truly just try to do my own thing. Um, I am somebody who has learned to jump at opportunities. I've learned to make my own opportunities, but a lot of the things I've been able to do has just been from being in the right place at the right time, including being in your wonderful documentary. I just happened to be there, and thank you for including that. But I think we have to remember that when you have a Bigfoot account, you have a person there, and they need to be respected. And so I say over and over again, where my interest, and I know I said this before, is could there be an undocumented primate or hominid out there in North America, like a natural living, breathing creature? Could that exist? I'm fascinated by that possibility. That's how I do my research. I am just as open to listening to people who have a very different experience and outlook, that this could be, whether it's something paranormal, in their eyes, whether it's an alien or something like that. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it is, so I think it's so important to not be making fun of people, to be generous with your ears, and have a lot less talking involved, and just, give people a chance to share what what their experience is. I think that's so important.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's been there's a real competitive edge to race to evidence. And I get the temptation. I've raced to my share of supposed evidence along the way as well. And maybe it's more of a guy thing. Maybe there needs to be a female approach to this to kind of unpack how to have that personal edge. We really haven't had it. Autumn Williams was kind of that voice back in 2012 timeframe. And might I say that 2012 was a banner year for the strange? I don't know if anybody else, can come forward with that, but I've noticed that 2012 was a breakaway year for people having strange encounters. I'm just going to put that out there. So I noted, your first sighting was in 2012 as well. But, I think, for what it's worth, I would just hope that you would double down your efforts, Amy, to dig into these witnesses. They need voices like this that really aren't jockeying for evidence, but want to hear the stories as weird and as raw as they are. Because as you know, the First Nations people don't, they don't stop at the weird part.
No,
They begin at the weird part.
right,
And then
right.
they're reluctant to tell you where it happens, where the evidence happens. The weird part is the oral story. And oftentimes I think that's relegated as just kind of folklore. So I appreciate you saying that.
Right. I mean, you look at any kind of large primate that has been discovered, and air quotes, by Western scientists. The people over in Africa and Asia, they already knew they were there. They called them things like the wild men, the hairy men, and we, as a whole, would say, okay, those are just moral tales or stories, until they weren't, until they were proven to be real. And I really feel that it's possible that we're doing the same to our indigenous people here, that we're just ignoring their stories when there's something real out there.
Yes, Jill, you have a burning question.
Burning like the sun. No, so Amy, I'm curious, of all the time you've spent out in the woods and with like all your knowledge of the animals and things in your area, what's been the most surprising thing that you've stumbled upon or learned or encounter, Bigfoot or non-Bigfoot related? I'm kind of diverting. Sorry. I just
No, that's
had to
okay.
know.
Oh gosh, I I take so many pictures. I have so many hours of recording out there, especially out in the Allegheny National Forest in a certain area where a lot of reports have been. And I don't usually find anything. I'm just being honest. Like, if Amy Boo comes out and says she found something, then it will be a banner day, because I don't find a lot. I mean, I find cool, flowers and edible plants, medicinal plants. I like to mess around with stuff like that, learning about those things, and really cool audio. Whether, one time somebody sent me an audio that I could not, an audio clip I could not figure out, and I always want to find out if it could be anything else before I go to Bigfoot. And it ended up being during bear hunting, like bow season, and it was a dying bear. So that was interesting. I didn't find that, but somebody sent it to me. Like, they have these death moans, and I'm like, it was sad, but it wasn't Bigfoot. So I like to try to figure those out. That was interesting. But you want me to tell you my story about what happened last summer? Because I don't think
Yes, please.
well, I don't think I've told anybody, like, on a podcast, this before, because it really, really affected me, to the point where I was just out camping with friends this past weekend, like for several days, even before the weekend, out in Allegheny National Forest. And I slept in a car the first night because I was scared. And I will admit that I get scared a lot. I'll be out in my tent, whether I'm with other people or by myself. A lot of times I'm at least in my tent by myself, and I'm just like, oh gosh, I don't believe in bears. I don't believe in bears, just in there scared. But what happened. I mean, it's not like I have any proof of it because it was the night before we were going to be doing some other things and didn't have any recorders out or anything like that. But myself and some friends were up on a very remote logging road in the Alleghenies. And, you have to have a shovel. You don't have a bathroom, nothing. You're just remote camping, right? So I'm in my tent. Um, Several yards away was my friend Monica in her tent, and next to her was our friend Tina. She was in her van, so you can drive in. So it's not like I love to hike into places, but this was you go down a really horrible road, but you can drive in. So she was in there, and then our friend Kevin and his daughter were hanging from hammock tents, and their dog. Anyway, so we didn't know everything that had gone on until the next morning when we're having our camp coffee and talking about this. But long story short, Tina, Monica, and myself all felt something. And Tina and I both separately, and our phones weren't working. Like we couldn't text each other or anything. We got texts from each other later when we got a signal that we had done that night. We both thought we were having medical emergencies to the point where Tina and I both were like, separately, like, we need to get out of here and go to a hospital. Like I had some heart problems after being sick a few years ago, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I wasn't nervous, I wasn't anxious or anything like that, but I just felt like uh, the best thing that I can compare it to now is in Jurassic Park when the T-Rex is walking and you don't see it and the water is moving. Like that's what it felt like that, or like a bass from music, you can feel it, in your body. And we all were like, oh my gosh, like we all had that same thing happen. Well, while I was lying there, because I'm kind of by myself a bit, it it scared me. Not scary like, ooh, there's something out there, but am I sick? Um, and I stayed awake. So everybody else had kind of fallen asleep after that happened. And again, we didn't know everybody's experience till later, but I'm lying there 100% awake, and I hear this god awful yell that came out of the woods from past where Tina was. And the only, like, it's making me like nervous as I say this. The only thing I can describe it as, it sounded to me like one of those, I think you call them like Tonga warriors or something, like just emptying their lungs, like just like, but a yell, not a scream, where I could feel that yell. The dog to the other side of me starts barking. It woke up Monica. Like it was just chaos for a little bit, at least inside my head, and or inside that tent. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what was that? And I didn't even immediately think Bigfoot. I'm thinking there's like a murder in the woods or something. And I just am bringing that up as an example to your question because I could not think of any animal that made that sound that would be in Pennsylvania. There is none. And this road that we were the only people camping along that road. There are several spots you can camp, but we didn't see any. And I'm thinking, like, is somebody trying to scare us? I truly believe we would have heard a car. We all say that we would have heard a car come in. Um, why would somebody, I try to convince myself, okay, maybe it was a person, but there's like, where did they come from? They would have had to hike a long time, and why would they want to scare us like that? You know, we all had weapons, like it would be really dumb. Um, and I don't know what it was. Like, I don't know what that was, but it really terrified me. And so this past week is the first time I've been up to that area, but this is the first time I had been there to camp. And I was like, you know what? I'm just letting myself be scared, and I am sleeping in the car for the first night. We'll see how I do. And then I was okay the next couple nights in the tent. But it really, for a while, I had nightmares about it. I had nightmares about it because I can't make sense of it, and I don't like not being able to make sense of it.
Sometimes it seems like these things, these experiences we have without visuals, there's a primordial part in our reptilian, quote unquote, reptilian brain, which I guess
Yeah.
science actually calls it the reptilian part of our brain, that we know, like we know it's something that is not of this world or not ordinary. It's like I think that humans should give their instincts more credit than
Mm-hmm.
we do. You know what I mean? Because it's like mothers that know about their children. Humans have incredible instincts. We just don't exercise them enough. But so many people that we've talked to that have had these experiences without the visuals, you really can't compare them to anything else. It's like you knew something was out there. You knew it wasn't a raccoon in heat.
Right.
Like it's just, I think we just know these things. I think we just get them. And
You're right. I think you're right. Like we looked into so many, like we were looking into, could it have been fracking that we were feeling? Could it have been an earthquake? We looked up, was there any seismic activity? Like everything to try to discount it. And then you're left with, you can't. And it's not, doesn't make sense. But you are so right about that. And sometimes I laugh at myself because if you were going to tell me that story, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you heard a Sasquatch. Like that wouldn't even phase me. But when it's myself, I think that's very common. Like I doubt myself, because I think there's this big fear that people will think I'm lying, or people will think I'm making it up, or that I am just not a good I don't have good judgment or something. And we're harder on ourselves than we are on other people, I think, as researchers sometimes.
yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And sometimes it takes years to debunk these things. There's a wealth of information out there that we don't have. And when you mentioned fracking, God, I would have never gone to something like that, but that's a brilliant thing to debunk. Probably a horrific sound in some levels. Maybe it explains some of the sky phenomenon where people think they hear, metal scraping or
Mhm.
trumpets or something like that. But that's encouraging that you think out of the box like that. Very much so.
Yeah, I think it's important, but I think that experience, whatever that was, has made me more kind to myself. I think, like I always am feeling, I don't know, I've never really thought about before. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or not, but I don't want to be known as a woman researcher. I just want to be a good researcher, but I also don't want people to think I'm a big wimp out there, so I'll admit that I'm scared, but it was hard for me to be like, yeah, you're allowed to sleep in that car, like it's okay. You're allowed to be scared of whatever that was. And, and you know what I mean? I don't even know how to explain it, but just to be kinder to myself and to believe myself.
Yeah, well, you're trusting your gut in the right places. I don't think it has anything to do with sex. So, male or female, we've all slept in our car a night or two. Some of us sleep at a hotel because they don't want to sleep in the car.
Oh boy.
Watch
Guilty.
it.
You saying, Jill? Room service what? What'd
Yeah.
I
We,
like
Hey,
it.
hey, I'll tell you what. No, I seriously, like when there have been occasions where Brett and I have been out in the wilderness, and we were camping down by Crater Lake, way off on some crazy road where no one was, and I remember in the middle of the night something going by the tent. Brett, do you remember that? And like
oh
we're like,
yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
I'm like, God, that deer is really heavy footed. Um, I always wondered because I was like, it's so deliberate how it ran right by our tent. Anyways, I survived, but I'm constantly prepared and expect at some point for a bear to try to eat me.
Yeah,
Right.
it's the
Well,
bears. It's the bears we're afraid of. Yep.
well, that's why it's funny that I had such a scary experience in the Alleghenies, because the summer before, being out in Montana, we had just seen a grizzly bear that day, the first day that we were camping out there in the middle of nowhere. And there's cougars and all that. Like, that's where I would think I would be more scared, but that's not where it happened. That's not where it happened.
No, I think the Alleghenies in general are known for some strange stuff going on in there, aren't they? I mean,
They
I remember,
are.
I remember
are.
that coming up on Robert Stack, and
Mhm.
Mysterious Encounters talking about that, or what was
It's
it called?
true.
Unsolved Mysteries, yeah.
Yep. It's true. There are so many reports out there. It's just super duper interesting.
Well, our guest has been Amy BUE. Amy, thanks for joining us here. Any projects coming up beside Project Zoobook that you want to talk about, explore, promote, whatever you want?
Sure. Well, I'm doing a lot of things, like I said, just around the area this summer. I was supposed to be out in Alaska, but that got postponed to at least next year. I was disappointed at first, but I needed to clean my basement anyway. And then I'm just doing a lot of more local things, but Alaska is going to be fun. I'm still looking for a few good men and women to make up a small team, and we're going to be heading out to the western interior. Are going to be taking a skiff down the river. We're going to be taking 2 jumper planes, and we're going to be led by a friend of mine who is one of the winners from the show Alone on the History Channel. And he lived for a while with some different indigenous groups out there. And he's fascinated by Bigfoot because of all the stories, kind of ancient stories and more current stories that they've told him. So we're going to be going really out there, and I'm excited for when it happens.
Amy, how does someone get in touch with you if they want to be a part of that?
My email is easy. It's bigfootamy@gmail.com.
There you
So that's
go.
on. And then one other thing is that my big goal for this summer is to finish my book I'm writing. It is on a gentleman named Tom Page, who was a financial backer for both Roger Patterson and Peter Byrne after Tom Slick died. And he was a gentleman. He passed away a few years ago, but he and I had several lunches together, hours and hours of I'm old, audio recordings from him and notes. We were working on the book together, and I really want to get that done because some of the stories he told me are pretty fantastic.
Amazing. Bringing out a little bit of Bigfoot history here. I've never heard that name. All right, Amy BUE, thank you again for your time, and we will be seeing you in the trees.
Yes, thanks for everything. This was fun.
Thank you, Amy. Really appreciate it.
Amy.
Thank you.
This has been a Resonance Production podcast. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at bigfootrevealedpod@gmail.com. Also, if you're just discovering the Flash of Beauty universe, you can watch our documentary on most major streaming platforms.